Okay, we're going to try this. All right, what we're doing is citing evidence using in-text citations. We're going to hit a lot of targets, which we talked about at the beginning of this unit. Ultimately, we cite sources to give credit to the author in which the information came from. It's not information you came up with. You read it somewhere. You took it. It's not from your head, so you got to cite it. How do you do that? Easy. You put quotes around whatever the fact is. And then, unlike with short answer responses, where we can just get away with saying the author said this or in the article it said, we have to put the author's last name and a page number if there is one. So, there's our example. Because the credible Hulk always cites his sources. So, what do? We take a fact, like this one, we put it in quotes, and we put the author's last name. If there's a page number, it goes there. You will not have page numbers because the database does not produce primary sources. Sometimes they're there, and it'll tell you they're a primary source, and it'll tell you the exact page that it came on. But typically there's no page number, so you're not going to put one there. You do not need to make one up. Just don't put it there. Put the author's last name, parenthesis, and period at the end. Just like this one. Here's the quote. There's the author's last name in parentheses, period. So on and so forth. Why do we include in-text citations? An in-text citation is literally a reference to the works cited page, which means the works that I cited in my essay. So Bradley 102 means that James Bradley wrote on page 102 this quote. And if I wanted to go into the actual source and see it, I could, because it's got to tell me this is where it came from. So that's why we do it, or part of the reason. What if you don't know the author's name? Easy. You use the title of the article. You can read all this stuff. You put book titles, blah, 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 blah. You're not using book titles. You're using database articles. So newspaper articles, journal articles, things like that. So critical essay on racial relations, very tough word there. You're going to put parenthesis, quote, there's the title, quote, just as it's printed in your citation or in your source, and parenthesis, period. So how do we include quotes in our text? Well, first, you're going to take a look at that Google Doc that I posted. That's an image that tells you all the different ways that you can say that according to experts, many argue, and things like that, that give me all or none types of scenarios there to argue my stuff, or to make it sound like more people believe the way I do. But you're also going to do this stuff too, because hearing or reading this person said, this person said, this person said, this person said, over and over and over again is boring. And your whole ploy here is to persuade someone to believe the way you do. And they're not going to want to believe you or believe the way that you do if you bore them to death. So let's not do that. So the first way we do this is run in a quote. Essentially, you are going to fuse the words that you have with some of the quote. And the way that works is you don't use an ellipses like we normally would. In fact, what you're going to do is you're going to paraphrase, meaning to put what the author said in your own words and infuse that, so the summary you came up with the actual quote. So as Jonah waited for his assignment, he realized that he had been skipped over. He quickly began to feel, quote, dizzy, and he couldn't focus his attention. If you read The Giver, that's what this is from. So this person summarized this part of the sentence, probably about 2 or 3 sentences actually, and then used part of this quote that said he was dizzy and couldn't focus his attention to really emphasize that fact. And it really does. It emphasizes a lot what's there. And then again, parenthesis, last name, page number if there is one, parenthesis, and the period at the end, because it's the period at the end of your sentence. I know I yell at you all during dialogue and most other times that your period needs to go in your quotation mark. And so it's warm and happy, but not this time. Just like when we were doing those interlopers quotes, or when I make you reference the literature and actually cite it, the period goes at the end. It says, hey, I finished. Here's another example. Same deal, paraphrased information mixed with the actual quote. Paraphrased information mixed with actual quote, and so on and so forth. Peppering in is the same idea, except for you're just going to use phrases. In this case, this is incorrect. The citation should go all the way at the end. You never put a citation in the random middle of a sentence. That's not correct. Blocking a quotation is using a quote that has 4 or more lines of text. You don't need to use quotation marks because you're blocking it, but you have to indent each line as long as the quote, and you still have to put the author's last name with the period at the end. So you notice here that this is indented. This period belongs over here. So here's the whole quote, you can read it on your own time. I highly caution you against block quoting unless you absolutely need to. And the reason is this essay is an argumentative essay, and you are your opinion without saying anything. And therefore, if you rely too heavily on the facts of somebody else, it becomes I found all these facts, but I didn't really have a reason behind them. And so you really want to use your words coupled or supported by somebody else's words to make your argument, and not the other way around. Paraphrasing is, like I said, you take the thoughts and words of what was already there, usually like 2 to 3 sentences, and you put it in your own words in about a sentence. And that way it kind of pares things down a little bit, makes it easier to read, and makes it so you don't have to do things like quote block. Because again, you are really emphasizing your opinions as opposed to the emphasis of the thoughts of other people. So again, you'll notice the parentheses and the period at the end. If you don't want to use the entire citation, you can use ellipses. This is something you already know how to do. You use the ellipses here because I want to skip part of the sentence that doesn't make any sense. I only wanted to use this part, so I put the ellipses at the beginning. So quotation, ellipses, Karen was a people smuggler, and then the end quotation, parenthesis, last name, all that stuff. But it's up to you, obviously, if you want to do that. Ultimately, you do not want to use lonely quotes, and that's where you just have a random quote in the middle of your paragraph. That's nonsense. That's the equivalent as if your pet pooped in the middle of your carpet in your living room. Was it your younger sibling? Was it your parents? Was it your pet? You don't know because I don't know because no one said so. So it's the same idea here. Look at that sad little emoji. He's sad because he doesn't have any words telling where he came from or why he's there. So that's the big thing, is we don't want to do that. Same with a short answer response. You absolutely have to introduce your quote. If you don't introduce your quote in some way or form, it's nonsense. The question becomes, why is it here? Why has the author left me here? There also is, there's a little bit more. If you have dialogue, so if you're quoting dialogue, an interview perhaps, you're going to need to, it's very simple. What you do is you take the quotation, because it's still a fact, it's still not your thoughts, and then you use an apostrophe to indicate that there's dialogue. So every time you would have normally viewed quotation marks, you use an apostrophe instead. And then when you're done, still the apostrophe to show it's the end quote, and then the quotation. Still with the last name, still with the period. And that's pretty much it, guys. It's time to start using all these things to try and adequately write your essays. Please refer to all the other resources I've given you to help you out. If you have any questions, please ask me.